This video was brought to you by Brilliant. Over the weekend, an article appeared in the Sunday Times that suggested that senior government figures are planning to put Britain on a path towards a Swiss-style relationship with the European Union. As soon as it came out, Twitter was set ablaze, not just by angry Brexiteers who saw this as another dilution of their true Brexit, but also some well-read Europeans who made the point that the EU's relationship with Switzerland isn't really working brilliantly at the moment. So in this video, let's explain just what a Swiss-style relationship entails, why it's being floated now, and just why neither the UK or EU are going to sign up to it. First things first, what exactly is a Swiss-style relationship? Well, unlike some other iterations of potential relations with the EU, there isn't really a copy and paste Swiss deal. Switzerland's relationship with the EU is pretty complex, relying on a multitude of different agreements broadly split into four parts. A 1972 free trade agreement, bilaterals 1 in 1999, bilaterals 2 in 2004, and then additional agreements from 2004 onwards. Key to the Swiss style of relationship with the EU are these bilaterals. They refer to a group of separate agreements that were negotiated, signed, and entered into force as a single package. For instance, Bilaterals 1 in 1999 had agreements on the free movement of persons, technical barriers to trade, public procurements, agriculture, overland transport, civil aviation, and research. The agreements in each package are linked by a guillotine clause. If one of the agreements is terminated, all of them are, after 6 months. Collectively, all of the agreements Switzerland has with the EU, which number more than 100, give Switzerland one of the closest working relationships with the European Union without actually being a member state. Swiss citizens have, like their EU counterparts, the right to travel, live and work freely within the EU and EEA, and vice versa for the EU and EEA citizens. Switzerland further has unimpeded access to the European single market, meaning goods and services can move into and out of the EU freely. All of this, however, comes at a price, both financially and legally. Switzerland pays a financial contribution to EU member states in a bid to reduce economic and social disparities in the EU, a contribution described by the Vice President of the European Commission as a legitimate counterpart to the country's access to the internal market. For some context on figures, in 2019 the Swiss Parliament signed off on a 1.3 billion Swiss franc contribution to cover 2019 through to 2029, roughly £1.15 billion. On the legal front, Switzerland must dynamically align its legislation with EU law. In practice, this means that if the EU jacks up regulatory standards in a relevant area, Switzerland must do the same. So why is the idea only gaining legs now? Well, it probably isn't and has actually been in the background for a while. Way back when Theresa May was first laying out her red lines, many urged the Prime Minister to go for a Swiss-style agreement. It was, however, very quickly ruled out because it was inconsistent with her infamous red lines. As the now famous graphic from Michel Barnier showed, a Swiss-style relationship would breach 3 red lines for May, there being no freedom of movement with the EU, no substantial financial contribution to the EU budget, and regulatory autonomy, i.e. the ability to diverge from EU standards, whether that be up or down. And it's in part those very same red lines that means that the UK government is unlikely, regardless of the report, to pursue it. So just why is it rearing its head again? The short answer being the economy. As last week's autumn statement made painfully clear to anyone watching, the UK economy isn't exactly in the best place right now, and there's copious evidence to suggest that trading barriers with the EU, erected post-Brexit, are making things much worse for small and big business alike. These concerns, combined with the UK's economic woes, have provoked some interest amongst British politicians about returning to so-called frictionless trade with the EU. In other words, trade with the EU without barriers, tariffs or quotas. As the original Sunday Times article highlighted, in private, senior government sources have suggested that pursuing frictionless trade requires moving towards a Swiss-style relationship over the next decade. However, they insist this would not extend to a return to freedom of movement. However, this is unlikely to be possible. Throughout the Brexit negotiations, the European Commission was clear. There would be no cherry picking, no having your cake and eating it. Assuming the reports are true, access to the European single market would require acceptance of all four freedoms: the freedom of movement of persons, capital, goods and services. You can't just have the free movement of goods without also accepting the other three. In any case, the plan is so politically toxic for the government that Downing Street almost immediately shot the report down, with the government spokesperson stressing it was categorically untrue that the UK was planning for a Swiss-style deal, adding that Brexit means we will never again have to accept a relationship with Europe that would not see a return to freedom of movement, unnecessary payments to the European Union, or jeopardise the full benefits of trade deals we are now able to strike around the world. Similarly, Maria Caulfield, a minister at the Department of International Trade, went on the record to call the reports fake news. And on Friday, Sunak told the CBI that he wouldn't be pursuing any Brexit policy that required regulatory alignment. This is probably partly because of the reaction from the arch-Brexiteers. Lord Frost, formerly the chief Brexit negotiator for the government, issued a thinly veiled threat to the government, stating that if reports were correct, the government ought to think better of these plans fast. And Nigel Farage was more explicit, tweeting that if the reports were correct, the Tories must be crushed. So if it's a hard no from this government, could another government, for instance a Labour one led by Sir Keir Starmer, pick up the mantle and go for a Swiss-style deal? Well, it's unlikely, and not for the want of trying from the UK side. Rather, to put it bluntly, the EU doesn't like the Swiss-style arrangements. In fact, it doesn't like the current state of EU-Swiss relations, even less so if the UK pursues it while refusing to accept freedom of movement. For nearly 7 years, the EU has been trying to overhaul the EU-Swiss relationship by consolidating the over 100 bilateral agreements into a single institutional framework agreement, or INST-A. Negotiations between the EU and Switzerland came to a screeching halt when, on the 26th of May 2021, the Swiss government announced it would be unilaterally withdrawing from negotiations on the framework and could not sign the new agreement. In a letter to Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, the Swiss Federal Council informed von der Leyen that the negotiations have not produced sufficient points of convergence, with substantial differences remaining on freedom of movement of persons, among other things. In reality, many in Switzerland saw the INST-A less so as a modernising of the EU-Swiss relationship, but a weakening of Switzerland's national sovereignty, with the agreement the first step on a path towards creeping EU accession. Following Switzerland's move, the Commission warned that the modernisation of our relationship will not be possible and our bilateral agreements will inevitably age. In other words, a tacit threat. So it's clear the EU really doesn't like Swiss-style bilateral agreements. And whilst the UK could very well propose a Swiss-style relationship to the EU, relationships have to be two-way, and it's just not that obvious that there's the capacity in Brussels to love another Swiss-style child. Anyway, understanding the pros and cons of such an agreement can be pretty, well, difficult at times. And do you know what else is difficult? Maths. So if you want to improve that for yourself, you should check out their courses over on Brilliant.
Because the world has never needed more smart thinkers. And Brilliant not only helps you brush up on the basics, but also leads you through university-level concepts like infinity, the history of maths, and the numbers behind neural networks. It's not just maths either. There's interactive courses on physics, computer science, and a whole variety of STEM topics. Plus, there's some incredibly fun content from your favourite YouTubers too, like Kurzgesagt and a brand new course from our Nebula friends over at Real Engineering. So finish off the year by bettering yourself with Brilliant, where you'll find thousands of incredible courses where you'll learn by doing, as well as discovering whole new ways of thinking. And better still, the first 200 people to sign up using our link in the description will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support.